Hello, ELA. I'm going to go ahead and start up a video for those of you that would like to participate in this but could not make it. We are asked to give some PDs in each month, and ELA generally has the first Tuesday and Thursday of each month. February got a little bit chaotic, and I tried to sneak in a day there at the end of the month. So we just had one of these, and we are kind of going another round if you want to attend, and know that they meet the first Tuesday and the Thursday, generally in the afternoons. I'm trying now because I didn't have very many participants in the morning. Okay, well, welcome aboard. I'm sure it's been a long day. I had a blast out there coming to visit some schools, and I got a chance to do read across America at Phillips, and I got to read to, I think, some second graders that were so fantastic. I wore a Seuss hat and did my best with what was the book called? The Book of Feet. It was really fun. You know, red foot, blue foot, right foot, left foot, something to that degree. It was really complex, but it was really fun to rhyme too. So, okay, let's jump in and let's look at some of the things that I was going to share with you today. Then the plan would be is to break into maybe some teams, or perhaps just kind of mute every so often, and I could have a conversation with some of the participants. So that way we could do a little planning together. Okay, so collaborative lesson planning, you're probably already doing all the time. Again, we're just going to kind of use this chance to revisit some of the qualities that we hope are true. Oh boy, I didn't change the date on this slide, so it should say 3/1/22. Happy March. Okay, one good question I think leads to lots of discussion and is really powerful that I might ask you as I'm coming to visit is, what do you want to see or hear more of from your students? I think discussion and conversation and textual evidence and all those things would probably be things that are kind of popular in response to this. But I think your move is decide when and where it's most effective and how it brings the engagement levels to a higher degree. And then we have more retention that way and more involvement. Okay, so I'm going to share with you briefly and kind of slowly, just deliberately pulling out some parts. And what I'm going to ask you to do is the little activity while we do step one. So you could do this asynchronously and think your way through the steps as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way our curriculum is designed to house essential questions that you both write and read about, and how those are designed to work, in case we are still grabbing a hold of that entire idea of kind of the unit design and the close reading process. I'm going to show you the three options that exist in each unit as potential writing practice. And again, if we're looking toward the way that this works for the future, even into next school year, it's some chances for you to make some decisions and for you to make some moves that you think are going to be most effective for your students. I'm going to talk a little bit about why the units are designed to include comparison contrast so much, and why, even though comparison contrast is not a very frequently tested standard, the RL 3C and whatnot, or RL, I think 3D and 3B, it's various mediums and how the artist might portray two different mediums or portray something in a historic medium versus a contemporary. So those are really cool, but also comparison contrast can be really helpful to help review and revisit some concepts. Sometimes students understand more the literary side of a standard, and they might see the same understanding on the informational text side when they make that bridge or connection. And then finally, there's a couple of tools and some lesson planning support that I could offer. Okay, as I'm talking a little bit about these next few slides and kind of wandering you through some of the research-based moves that we are working our best to internalize into our lessons, I want you to really pick three main words that summarize your understanding and your takeaway from today. We will put those in the chat following this little part. And then I would like to hear from a couple people that I might call on based on what you put in the chat. Okay. In fact, that's how Desi was doing it when I just went to one of their recent sessions. And I thought that was a really cool strategy to pass on. Once people put things in the chat, then you can more easily invite them to talk about it, and they'll have already given you a little start of what they were going to say. Okay, so intentional moves in the research base that goes with the current design of our curriculum is to really emphasize all of the parts of ELA, and we're going to kind of pick those apart a little bit. Also in this slide that I'm going to share in Google Classroom, you can click on the top where it says research base, and you can find a chart that kind of helps align where these particular parts of learning might exist in our current structure in the curriculum. Okay, so vocabulary is taught in the way we're looking at it, which is great, in a variety of specific instructional methods, context-based, restructuring, taking things apart, putting them back together. It's also in pre-instruction and vocabulary before the reading lesson ever begins. So again, that is a research-based suggestion. A lot of times, if words are just word lists or not taught in context or not really major part of the unit, then they're seen as extraneous and kind of extra and not so much built into the overall goals. Please know that the vocabulary is there, present, and following some good processes. One of those is that students are given both information about the definitions and examples of the words in a variety of contexts. Also, if you use the digital scaffolds that are available with StudySync resource, then you'll find that even sometimes visual glossaries and things really are there as support. Okay, reading instruction includes a combination of strategies, direct and indirect, for building vocabulary. And when students are dragging and dropping, sometimes with easier terminology that we're simply doing for review, it's still a chance to demonstrate, that we know those concepts and can pass them by. And then in the event that a few people don't, we know who to talk to and how to pull a small group. Okay, as it says on the right, the vocabulary items are all derived from content learning materials. So you'll find those in the units. You'll find those in the unit maps that I'm designing for next year. Okay, and vocabulary is taught through an active student participation. A lot of the text talk questions and a lot of the early discussions around a blast and the particular ways that a unit is kicked off by introducing the essential question all feature that early need to say, we're going to use these words for the rest of the unit, so let's start thinking about it. Okay, another research base that we want you to understand and how our lesson plans could incorporate all of these strategies relates to text comprehension. In this case, students engage in multiple readings, repeated readings that will build fluency and comprehension. So these smaller chunked texts that already have a lot of the places to stop and discuss built into them, fantastic text-dependent questions. Our goal is to really make use of those and see how high yield they can be as we get better at implementing them into the daily instruction. Okay, again, students identify and use text organizational structure to facilitate close reading. So again, that's a lot of what we're doing is taking apart the text and thinking about how the author organized this reading for a specific purpose. And then students are also asked down the road to create their own organizational structure when they write in a similar unit. Okay, so students identify and utilize text-based evidence. We certainly are doing that. Most of the questions that are already provided are very well written and pretty strong as far as requiring the student to go back and hunt for the answers in the text and then make an analysis of that and draw a conclusion. So there aren't a whole lot of just hunt and peck DOK1 questions, but again, those don't exactly require text evidence so much. And might be a reason that we feature higher level questions that require more evidence. Okay, if students are asked to generate questions themselves and gather evidence and build knowledge about something they're curious about, that inquiry model is definitely part of each unit. It's part of the extended writing that we're asking teachers to work into each unit, so that as students have been reading about a specific topic, they may have been generating questions of interest throughout that process, but then discovering it in the latter half of the unit might also open up some chances to do research and some student choice as I decide what kinds of text I'm including in my research. Okay, a variety of writing tasks exist, right? Throughout the course of our curriculum, we're introducing each of these informational, narrative, and argumentative, as well as an oral project in Unit 4 for most grades, so that we have that experience at least prior to going to after high school to be a good presenter or job ready. So also, students engage in collaborative reading. So reading text is often about taking it apart in the curriculum and the way it's designed, and using the text talk questions that are in all of the lesson plans. They're generally in red and stand out. So if you're hunting for those, look for text talk questions, and please see if those can belong in your groups as we work our ways through readings. Okay, writing. Students are going to explore a variety of digital tools. There's a lot of scaffolding included in our Study Sync resource, as well as a lot of other places related to writing, but it's all there in one spot, and it's very procedural and very much down to if we needed to recover some of the issue. Like if we haven't really talked about introductions in a while, then it might be a wise lesson to kind of pull back up, bring to the attention at the start of the project. If you've noticed that particular skills are lacking, or need more practice from earlier units, then those kind of come with you and obviously help us tackle them in the next writing that we do. Okay, if students engage and demonstrate an understanding of the text, these writings are throughout all of the reading selections. When you're doing think questions, it's really just a chance for us to do the kind of writing that is just about us thinking and showing our thinking on paper. You can see that there's ample time built in. And we certainly do. We want you to know that there's a lot of time suggested to be about writing as you do this gradual release, where students might spend some time on that writing, often self-led or catching up on particular activities that you have put out there for a while. All of the writing is based on skill-oriented instruction. So each of the little mini lessons, if we call them that exist in Study Sync, feature particular skills and goals that we really want to make sure we don't accidentally skip over as when we teach. Sometimes from our memory of every year, we might accidentally leave out a major part sometimes. So please do look back at the procedural path that goes into the extended writing prompt, or the project-based learning prompt, or the oral writing prompt, oral presentation prompt. All of those have really specific goals in mind that we're going to work on and kind of discuss in peer groups as students are working on targeting specific skills in their writing. Okay, so we talked about a lot of those. One on this that I brought out just then was like peer review, and that another really strong high yield component is having students discuss and exchange ideas related to what they're writing about, but also give each other suggestions about improvement. And each writing passage and prompt may have specific goals for revision in mind, whether they be punctuation or organizational. So if we apply those two strategies per writing unit and really have peer groups center on those types of growth-oriented behaviors in our writing, then we really do help highlight what it is we're working on in the class. And then peers are really good at helping each other see what that looks like, even better than their teacher examples. Okay, speaking and listening is just really the biggest vehicle that we can use to work on growing our ELA students. Oral practice and verbal practice using language leads to written practice and leads to a lot more fluency. If students are immersed in the kind of language that we're then going to write with, we find that this is a chance to practice kind of privately and refine your own skills. And then maybe even in your group, take some chances by using some words you're less familiar with, and practice really using this academic language that no one just sits around at home and practices for fun. Okay, our ideas will get more logical and thoughtful when we practice them more often, and when we give chances for our students to be heard and celebrate those responses, then you'll definitely find, I think, that you'll get an increase on the amount of responses and the logical and thoughtful way that we're celebrating how they're responding. Okay, when their own ideas come into these conversations, this is huge. I was at Phillips this morning, and with second graders, we pulled that off where we talked about feet, but then we also talked about shoes. And suddenly everybody wanted to tell me what their favorite shoes and really what that had to do with their hobbies and how many different sports they loved. So teachers in that moment, while I was asking that question, learned some new things just from that one question that could help us connect with our students, but it could also help us tailor some of our instruction towards some interests down the road. Okay, diversity and interpersonal communications and interactions is one thing that I have been sitting on a community called competence-based learning with DESE. And one of the things that really employers are saying we need the most practice with are some of these job-ready interpersonal communications and interactions. How to know what to do in the moment when no one's really telling you, and then how to find solutions. So also media elements are a lot of the messaging that students are asked to include when they present information, but also throughout the resource, there's a lot of media elements to help them grasp the message and then to see what a good example of some of these media elements are. Okay, conventions, we practice through our writing. And as is the case with vocabulary, if these were ever totally divorced from the writing process or the reading process and taught in isolation, you would find that they very rarely show up as growth in our students' work. So these shared language activities really are helpful when they are based on a writing project or a personal piece that a student is applying those skills back to. Again, there are direct forms of instruction in all of the writing components, so that if we were working on passive voice in a certain grade level, it would be fantastic that everyone saw that and knew that that was a grade level goal and something we're really, really trying to focus on for that year. Okay, also when students approach language as a matter of craft and see what they're reading as potential mentors that are exemplars of the kind of craft that they are interested in producing. And then this helps us, value those documents that we're reading. May we consider them a little dull or dry, we could also praise them sometimes for just the ability of the author to write clear and informative prose. So last one is fluency. And in the event that we need to practice fluency at the 6th through 12th grade level, we will find those students. And we'll find that there are tools that exist also in our curricular path and in our resource, including the way to simulate oral reading, the way for students to hear the best reader and then start to internalize some of that themselves if they do it on a regular basis. It also gives us a chance to work on just oral reading support and phrasing support. Often this might be done in a small amount, popcorn read in our classes, but sometimes this is in pullout or in small groups, even with an interventionist, or you push in elementary settings. Okay, and so again, fluency is talked about and assessed and used both in informal and formal ways. And it's assessed in terms of word correct per minute. So in the event that you had students where we really wanted to pull back to this level and still start studying some of the phonemic or other reasons that we might be missing some of the base that helps us with our fluency, which helps us with our comprehension, then really we have, some potential tools to utilize to help in that manner. Okay, so if you picked out some words and you would be willing to just shoot them out there, this is the part where we would put them in the chat. And then I would hear from some people and we would hear a couple and see what people shared. So let me think about getting that together, and then I will just kind of not record that part, but we will go on. All right. Okay, we're back. So thank you to those that shared out some words at your groups or wherever you did at your own site. I hope that led to some fruitful conversation. And it gave me a chance to really kind of lay out some of the research moves that we're making. Okay, talking a little bit more, just briefly, about essential questions. Notice that our curriculum is set up with this power of the essential question, where the majority of what we are going to talk about for a chunk of reading and writing will revolve around one main question. And what's nice is these questions are compelling and perhaps things that all ages would still want to discuss even long after school. Like, who am I, or what makes me who I am? Those will never stop being challenging or interesting questions. Okay, also the benefits in the thematic design is that if you are thinking, I want to give my students more power of choice, I want to have more power of choice as a teacher, you can extend the unit and ask for additional research. You can ask for them to find readings that help belong in this unit. You can ask for students to look on informational text when you're reading literary, or when you're reading informational, they could be asked to look for an additional literary text. But essentially, as students select their own text for research, therein lies where a lot of the choice comes from as well. They may not select the texts that we read throughout the unit, all of them. You might ask that they pick one and one additional, but I think those are really good ways to get the essential question to have full power, and for us to think about how that equips us for some choice. And then also just to utilize some of the powerful scaffolding that already exists that we could send home with our students. A lot of these units that we would be able to send out via electronic means about writing have a lot of little things that students might tap into when at home and all by themselves, without you there to push them or help them support through the writing process. So just know that that's another feature. 3 options exist in each unit, and I'm doing my best for next year to make sure you see those from the very beginning of each unit, and that you might start to vary that, so that you don't necessarily have to do a project-based learning task in every unit. You may want to try if that's the theme that you are pushing for the most in your building. You definitely, if you're an end of course class, want to feature a couple of these challenging under pressure writing prompts where you need to take 2 or more of the sources and synthesize to respond to the prompt. And in unit 4 is traditionally the oral presentation, like I said earlier. So if that's something that you think in an earlier grade you want to prepare for more than just in unit 4, then it might be something to bring forward a little bit more. Okay, the comparison contrast part that I said I was going to mention. When I was teaching, I figured out that, wait a minute, some students have this wired in their brain where they understand one of these concepts, which means they could definitely understand the other one if we could just make a connection between the two. For example, if you know what a theme is and you can sort through a reading passage, discover what it is, infer what it is, and then support it with evidence, my hypothesis, the student you are, can also do that with central idea. There may be a barrier or a reason that you don't see that as the same process. So the more that we could connect these two, theme and central idea, you'll see that they have a common trait, and when we know we've found it, is that they have the correct supporting evidence. So students could take those 2 things home in their minds and use them for the rest of their future, because they will continue to see theme and central idea down the road, and they will continue to be alike and different in ways that we could have students explain. Same thing is true with point of view and author's purpose. When I am writing a poem, I may have more than one purpose. I may be persuasive. I may be informative. I may be entertaining. I may do all of those things in one concise effort at a poem. However, when I read, I have to kind of decide, what was the goal of the author? And it's very likely that the goal of an author's purpose might have been similar in informational text to that in a literary text. Say a poet and a researcher may have a very similar goal, but again, the way that we compare and contrast that goal and look at their different methods really helps us with a deep understanding of the concepts in the unit. And you'll notice that in all the units are some elements of comparison contrast, and that is essentially why. Okay, last slide to show off. It's a lesson planning tool. I know you've seen a number of tools. This tool I featured early in the year, I'm bringing it back to show you again. It starts with backwards design and really gives people a sense of starting from the kind of writing that you know is going to be produced in this unit, and then working our way toward that writing in a backwards way by starting up by doing the reading that really is the mentor text or mimics the kind of writing that we're going to do down the road. So I am here and willing to support and available. In the event that you're working on doing small groups, I put a link here called the Station Rotation Guide, and it is a study sync document, but I want to pull it up and show you the value of this document is thinking about study sync in a different way. It's a big document, but I think it'll support you fully in that it tells you about it and then gives you some strategies and some research to back why they would be good moves. But basically the 4-part structure that study sync is made up of could almost be your 4 sessions in some classes. So if they were going to rotate, they may not even have to physically move around in your class. You could, because it's a chance to get up and move and have some fresh energy. But then you just move on to the next station where students together may be working on the vocabulary part, or together working on the think questions, or together working on annotating and doing the reading, right? The cool part is once you do that in stations, then you could call on some groups and have them report out on their successes and what they noticed after everybody's been around each station one time. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to go ahead and place this on our Google Classroom. Please reach out with any support you need. As we're going forward, we're seeing a lot of teachers taking hold of what our resources have to offer, but it is very important that you make them fit and belong with your students. And you're the magic piece that does that. No resource can do that on its own. You know your students best, and you know some of these materials that are out there for you to select from would be very organized, ready to go, and pretty much something you can just put right in front of your students. But your job then is to make that powerful, exciting, dramatic, engaging. And to do so, I know you're looking at things ahead of time and really thinking about those very questions. What's going to draw people in? How am I going to keep interest at a high level? How am I going to see an application of this work today? And then how am I going to measure that so that I have some data and something to respond to for future instruction? All right, thanks guys. Thanks for listening. Hope you got something today. Have a great day.